Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. It was one of those nights where everything felt perfectly normal, almost too normal. The kind of quiet that makes you realize just how loud silence can be. I was curled up on the couch, a cup of tea cooling on the coffee table, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the background. Leo, my Labrador retriever, was stretched out on his favorite rug near the corner of the living room, snoring softly. It was our usual routine after a long day, me decompressing him, keeping me company, his tail occasionally thumping against the floor when I looked at him. Leo was more than just a cute dog to me. He was my shadow, my protector, my partner in crime. At 6 years old, he was strong and alert, but still had the playfulness of a puppy when the mood struck. He had this way of tilting his head. His ears perked up as if he were trying to understand every single word I said. His amber eyes always seemed to be full of something: love, curiosity, or maybe just that unshakable loyalty Doc seemed to have that night. Everything seemed calm, predictable. But looking back, there was this small, almost imperceptible shift in the air. Something I didn't notice at first because it felt so small, like the faintest breeze brushing past you in a room with no windows open. And then out of nowhere, Leo's head shot up. At first I thought maybe he'd heard something outside: a car, door slamming, a cat in the alley. Anything that might spark his attention. "What is it, bud?" I asked, my voice light, expecting his ears to relax, and for him to settle back down like he always did. But he didn't. His ears were stiff, his gaze locked on the far corner of the room. It wasn't like him to just freeze like that. Usually if he thought there was something worth investigating, he'd get up, maybe give a little bark, or at least trot toward whatever had caught his interest. But this time nothing. He just stared. "Leo," I said again, sitting up straighter, the warmth of the tea forgotten in my hands. He let out the softest growl I'd ever heard from him. Barely audible, but enough to send a chill up my spine. It wasn't the kind of growl he used when the mailman came to the door, or when another cute dog crossed his path during a walk. This was something different. I glanced toward the corner. He was focused on squinting in the dim light of the single-floor lamp by the couch. There was nothing there, just the old armchair. I never really sat in a stack of books I'd been meaning to read, and a shadow that seemed a little darker than it should have been. But that was just my mind playing tricks on me. "Right, hey," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was picking up speed. "It's fine." "Leo, see nothing there." I patted the cushion next to me, hoping to coax him over, but he didn't move. If anything, his body seemed to tense up even more. The fur along his back, standing up like static, had run through it. And then he did something that made my stomach drop. Leo backed up. His eyes never left the corner, his growl turning into a low, steady rumble. I'd never seen him back away from anything. Not when we accidentally startled a raccoon on a high. Not when an overly excited cute dog barked at him from across the park. Leo was brave, sometimes too brave for his own good. But now he looked scared. Leo wasn't always mine. He came into my life during one of those moments where everything feels like it's crumbling, and you're just trying to hold it all together. I just moved into this house. A small rental with creaky floors, and a backyard that always seemed overgrown. No matter how often I trimmed it. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but everything about it felt empty. I was coming out of a tough breakup, the kind that leaves you questioning everything about yourself. And I didn't even know who I was without someone else. I remember the first time I saw him. I wasn't even looking for a cute dog. I was at the shelter helping a friend pick up her new kitten, walking past rows of barking, wagging chaos. But then there he was, quiet, calm, sitting in the corner of his kennel with those big, soulful eyes. He didn't bark or jump like the others. He just looked at me, his head tilted slightly as if he were saying, "What's your story?" The staff told me he was a stray about 3 years old when they found him, thin and skittish, but friendly. They didn't know much about where he'd been or what he'd gone through. But he'd already been passed over by several adopters because he wasn't as flashy or energetic as some of the other cute dogs. I wasn't planning on adopting a cute dog that day, but something about him tugged at me. Wasn't just pity. It was like he understood, like he saw through all the walls. I'd put up and decided I needed him as much as he needed me. The first few weeks with Leo were an adjustment to say the least. He didn't trust easily and honestly. Neither did I. He'd flinch at sudden movements, shy away from loud noises, and spend hours just watching me from a distance, as if he were still deciding whether I was safe. But little by little he opened up. I'll never forget the first time he wagged his tail when I came home. It was this hesitant, almost awkward little thump against the floor. But it meant everything from there. Our bond grew. You became my reason to get up in the morning to step outside to breathe. We went on long walks every day, even when I didn't feel like it. And somehow those walks became therapy sessions. He'd trot along beside me, his ears flicking back every so often to check if I was talking to him, and I did. I told him everything, things I'd never say out loud to another person, and he'd just listen. His quiet presence more comforting than any advice could have been. Leo had this way of knowing when I needed him. If I was having a bad day, he'd press his head against my leg, nudge my hand with his nose until I started petting him. If I cried, he'd climb into my lap, all 70 pounds of him, and rest his head on my shoulder, like he was trying to absorb my sadness. He wasn't just my cute dog, he was my family. There were little quirks about him that made him even more special. He hated thunderstorms and would crawl under the bed at the first distant rumble of thunder. No matter how much I tried to reassure him, he loved peanut butter, hated car rides, and had this strange habit of barking at the vacuum cleaner like it was his sworn enemy. But more than anything, he was loyal, fiercely, unconditionally loyal. That's why it rattled me so much that night when he growled at the corner of the room. Leo didn't growl unless he meant it. And the fact that he backed away, it still sends a shiver through me. Just thinking about it. I tried to shake it off at first, telling myself it was just some weird fluke. Maybe Leo had heard something outside. Maybe the house was settling. Or maybe just maybe there was a rat in the wall. I glanced back at the corner trying to make sense of it. There was nothing there. Just the dim light casting, long shadows, nothing moving. But Leo wasn't having it. He stayed fixed on that spot, growling louder, now a low, menacing sound that seemed to vibrate through the room. I stood up, the hairs on the back of my neck pickling as I walked toward him. "Leo, come on, buddy," I said, trying to sound calm, but my voice cracked. I reached down to pet him, hoping to comfort him. But when I touched his fur, he flinched like I'd burned him. That was when I felt it, the cold, a chill in the air that I hadn't noticed before, like the room had dropped several degrees in a matter of seconds. My breath flogged in front of me, and I pulled my sweater tighter around myself, the sudden weight of fear settling deep in my ch***. Leo, what's wrong? I asked, kneeling beside him, but he didn't respond. His eyes never left that corner, his whole body rigid, his growl turning into a quiet whine. My heart was pounding in my ch*** now. But I told myself I was being ridiculous. Doc sensed things we don't. Maybe there was a raccoon in the attic. Maybe the shadows were playing tricks on him. But whatever the reason, he wasn't backing down. I looked around the room trying to make sense of it. The shadows from the old furniture seemed normal. The bookshelf stood just where it always did. I glanced at the window half, expecting to see the reflection of something out there in the yard. But there was nothing, just darkness. And yet Leo's reaction was so intense. My mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation, but nothing seemed right. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something watching us, something just beyond my reach. "It's okay," I whispered, but the words felt hollow even to me. I wanted to comfort Leo, but the fear creeping up my spine was making it harder to breathe. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. It wasn't just Leo who was on edge. It was like the entire place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly Leo's growl stopped for a moment. Everything went eerily quiet. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more scared. I waited, holding my breath, before I heard it, a soft, creaking sound like the floorboards shifting underweight. My heart skipped a beat. I turned my head toward the source of the noise, my eyes wide, searching, the shadows muffling. I looked back at Leo, whose body was tense, his eyes still locked on that corner. And then in the deepest part of my stomach, I felt it, a presence. Something intangible, yet heavy, like it had been there the whole time, watching and waiting. "What is it?" "Leo," I murmured again, my voice barely audible, but he didn't respond. He was still staring at the corner, his body trembling now. And that's when it hit me. The feeling of being watched, like someone or something was there with us, just beyond the edge of my vision. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. I stood frozen, unsure whether to run or stay. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it in my bones. Something wasn't right. And Leo knew it. That I don't know how long we sat there. Leo and I frozen in that heavy, suffocating silence. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened, but nothing made sense. The fear that had settled in my ch**t wasn't going away in Leo. Leo wasn't moving, he hadn't even blinked. I started pacing the room, looking at every corner, every shadow. The night had suddenly become an unfamiliar place, like the walls were closing in around me. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I tried to dial my friend James. Maybe I could get him to come over. Maybe he'd laugh it off. Tell me I was being dramatic. But I couldn't bring myself to hit send. I knew if I left the room, if I turned my back for even a second, something I couldn't understand might happen. Leo's low growl started up again. This time more desperate, like he was trying to warn me about something I still couldn't see. My heart was pounding in my ears and I felt so powerless. What was he seeing? What was he hearing? My mind kept spinning in circles, trying to come up with a rational explanation. But there was nothing. The air felt thick, like the room had become a pressure cooker, and every breath I took only made it worse. I walked over to him, my steps hesitant. Leo, come on. It's okay, I said, my voice trembling now. But he wasn't having it. He backed away even more, his growls turning into sharp guttural barks, his tail tucked tightly between his legs. It wasn't like him, not at all. Leo was brave. He was always the protector. He didn't cower. I couldn't explain why, but I felt a sudden rush of panic, this intense need to get out of that room, to escape. But I didn't want to leave Leo not like this. He was my responsibility. He had been there for me through every dark moment in my life. And now I needed to be there for him. Come here, buddy, I whispered, reaching for his collar. But the moment my hand touched him, he jerked away, pulling back with an urgency I had never felt from him before. His eyes were wild, now darting around like he was seeing something. I wasn't, and that's when I heard it. The whisper, a sound so faint. I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it, or if it was real. At first I thought it was the wind outside, but there was no breeze, no draft, and the windows were shut tight. The whisper grew louder, more distinct. My name, my full name, Claire. I froze. My body went cold, like someone had poured ice water through my veins. I knew that voice. I'd heard it before, long ago, in a different place, in a different time. It was the voice of someone I'd tried so hard to forget. Claire, it came again, clearer this time, as though it was right behind me, whispering in my ear. But when I turned around, there was nothing. Nothing but Leo, his body trembling, his eyes wide with terror. And that's when the floorboards creaked again. But this time it was different. It wasn't just a noise. It felt like someone was walking toward me. I backed up slowly, my heart pounding in my ch**t, not knowing what was real anymore. Was I going crazy? Was this some kind of nightmare? I reached for the light switch, my fingers brushing against it as I fumbled, desperate to see something, to know what was happening. But before I could flick it, everything went dark. The power went out. The silence that followed was deafening, and in that pitch-black room, I could hear Leo's frantic panting. My own heart beat loud in my ears. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was wait. Wait for something to happen, for the truth to reveal itself. Even though I wasn't sure, I wanted to know what that truth was. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whisper stopped. The air felt lighter, but the tension remained thick and suffocating. I could still feel it, that presence. It hadn't left. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark with Leo, but it felt like hours. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, and the silence, the kind that presses down on you like a weight, was suffocating. Leo had calmed down somewhat, but he still wouldn't move from that spot. He stayed close to me, his body trembling, and I could feel his heart beata thudding against my leg. I kept telling myself it was over, that the worst had passed. Maybe it was just my imagination, or the fear had finally made me see things that weren't there. But the feeling in my gut, the sense that something wasn't right, wouldn't go away. It was still there, lingering in the corners of the room like a shadow that wouldn't disappear. I had to know I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. Slowly I stood up the floor, creaking beneath me, and reached for my phone. The glow of the screen was a relief in the darkness, even if it only illuminated the edges of the room. I tried to call James again, but the call dropped. My heart sank as I realized the power wasn't just out in the room. It was out everywhere. The entire house was plunged into darkness, and I was alone, really alone, with only Leo to keep me grounded. "Leo," I whispered, unsure of what I was asking. He didn't respond, but his eyes were locked on the corner again, his ears flat against his head. I couldn't understand it. Why was he so afraid? Taking a deep breath, I started walking toward the corner, my every step slow and deliberate. My mind was screaming at me to turn back, to just let it go, but my feet kept moving. When I reached the corner, I froze. It was nothing, just a bare wall, empty space. I let out a nervous laugh, feeling foolish, like maybe I had just made a mountain out of a molehill. But when I turned back around, that cold sensation hit me again. Stronger. This time felt like I was being watched. I snapped around to face the corner, my heart racing. Just the same old shadows, the same creaky floor. But I wasn't alone, not really. Leo was watching me with wide eyes, his body tense like he knew something I didn't. His growl had started up again, low and threatening. But this time it wasn't aimed at the corner. It was aimed at me. "Leo, what is it?" I asked, my voice shaking, but he didn't respond. Instead, he took a step back, pulling me toward the hallway. It wasn't like him. Leo had never been the type of cute dog to pull me anywhere unless it was for a walk. But now it was like he was guiding me away from something, his eyes full of urgency, his tail tucked low between his legs. The house felt different, like it was pressing in on me. The walls seemed to close in, and the silence felt too heavy to bear. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I couldn't leave Leo behind. I followed him down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the dark. But the further we got from the room, the more the air seemed to lighten. When I reached the kitchen, Leo finally stopped, his head cocked to the side, his eyes wide but not fearful. He seemed more alert, like he had led me somewhere for a reason. I stood there panting, trying to make sense of everything, but nothing made sense anymore. It was like I was living in a dream, or worse, a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. And as I stood there, Leo by my side, I realized something. Whatever it was that had been in the house with us wasn't gone. It was still out there somewhere, waiting. I had to figure out what was going on. I had to know if Leo was seeing something that I couldn't. And in that moment I made a promise to him, and to myself, that I would find the answers no matter what it took. But I also knew one thing. For certain, things would never be the same again. The fear, the unknown, would linger in the back of my mind. Leo was still here, and he was still my protector, even if I wasn't sure what we were protecting ourselves from anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days that followed were a blur. Everything felt different. I couldn't shake the feeling of that cold presence, and Leo seemed to sense it too. He wasn't the same cute dog he used to be. He'd always been my shadow, the kind of cute dog who was glued to my side no matter what. But now he was distant. He'd still follow me around, but his eyes were always darting to the shadows, to the corners, to the places where something seemed to linger. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking it, that it had all been a strange, vivid dream. But I couldn't deny the way Leo reacted. I found myself staring at the same corner every night, half expecting something to happen again, but nothing did. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was as if the silence itself was holding its breath, waiting for something that I wasn't sure I wanted to face. Leo had gone back to sleeping on his bed by my side, but there was still something off about the way he'd wake up in the middle of the night, his body stiff and alert, as though he was hearing something. I couldn't. And every time that happened, my heart would pound, and I'd feel that weight in the pit of my stomach. The knowledge that whatever was happening wasn't over. I started researching, diving into every paranormal theory I could find, hoping to make sense of the fear that had settled in my bones. But the more I read, the more questions I had. People said animals could sense things we couldn't, that cute dogs had an uncanny ability to pick up on energies, on presences, on things that lurked beyond our understanding. But that didn't help me. It only made me more uncertain, more afraid of what Leo had seen. One evening, while Leo lay at my feet. I heard it again. The whisper. Just like before, it was faint, barely audible. But I recognized it, my name. And this time I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I stayed still, my breath catching in my throat as I waited for the next sound. But it never came. The air was thick with silence, and the whisper seemed to fade like it had never existed. And that's when I realized something. Maybe I was the one who had to change, not just Leo. Maybe I had been so caught up in the fear of the unknown that I hadn't allowed myself to face it. I couldn't let whatever was happening control me, control us. I had to take charge. I had to confront whatever was out there, even if I didn't understand it. The next night, after Leo had gone to sleep, I walked to the corner. I stood there feeling ridiculous but determined. I wasn't going to let it win. I wasn't going to let fear define this space. Slowly I turned on the light. I looked at the empty wall, the shadows in the quiet room. Nothing. There was nothing there. But Leo stirred behind me, his tail thumping against the floor. I glanced back at him, and for the first time in days I saw something in his eyes, a calm, a sense of peace, like he knew we'd be okay. I knelt down beside him, and he licked my hand just like he always did. And in that moment I felt it, the connection between us was unshakable. Whatever had happened, whatever it was that we had experienced, it hadn't torn us apart. Maybe I didn't have all the answers. Maybe I never would. But I had Leo and he had me. And together we could face whatever was out there. Because in the end, the things that go bump in the night, the things that haunt us, are nothing compared to the love and loyalty that bind us together. And with that thought I closed my eyes and let the peace of the moment wash over me. The house was quiet once more. But this time it felt that if this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us craft more engaging stories for you.